Liz Mugavero, how are you?
Hi, Rich. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I appreciate you coming on today and sharing your story with the creative community.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Let me give the audience a brief introduction for you before we jump into the question and answer scenario. You are a best-selling mystery author with a dual persona, writing under both names Liz Mugavero and Cate Conte. You have published three successful cozy mystery series with major publishing houses, two with Kensington Books, and one via St. Martin's Press. Your acclaimed debut, your first novel, Needing to Die, launched the Pawsitively Organic Mysteries in 2013 and earned a nomination for the prestigious Agatha Award for Best First Novel. You're the creator of three distinct series. As Liz, you've penned Positively Organic Mysteries. As Cate, you write the Cat Cafe Mysteries, and then the Full Moon Mysteries, featuring magic and mystery themes. You're a writing coach, where you coach fellow creatives, guiding writers to prioritize their craft, build structure, and bring their stories to life with a charming woo-woo touch, as you describe it. Lifelong passion turned purpose. A storyteller since childhood, you've overcome societal doubts to transform your dream into reality, now inspiring artists and others to do the same. That's very fascinating.
Thank you. It sounds pretty good when you say it all together like that.
That's what I get from every guest is that, wow, that sounds so amazing. And they
Is that
don't
me?
realize all the things that they've done. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So let's go back in time and we'll start off with my only structured question, which is where were you born and what was life like as a kid for Liz?
Yeah. Oh, geez. So I was born in Massachusetts and in a town called Lawrence. People might know it if they are from around here. Um, I grew up in the Methuen area, which is near the New Hampshire line up in Massachusetts. And, my parents were both teachers and we just were kind of normal. I mean, I say normal tongue in cheek, but we were kind of normal for that time, I guess. I had a little brother, he's 7 years younger than me, so I had a pretty solo childhood for the first 7 years, which was
Yeah,
kind of cool. And then he came along and ruined it all. So, but
I get
yeah.
it. What type of teachers were they?
So my
Parents.
dad taught math, which is hilarious because I can barely add without using my fingers.
Okay.
And my mother taught reading to children with reading disorders.
Okay. All right. Interesting. How about grandparents? Were your grandparents very much involved in your early childhood?
Yeah, I was super close to my mother's parents. My grandfather on her side was a detective, and I always credit him with
Oh,
my love for crime. So
okay.
I think that's where I started to get really fascinated by it. Not that he would tell me that much because I was pretty young when he retired, but he, he had stories and he did share some of them. And he was a wonderful storyteller. And I think, he was a verbal storyteller, but I think it's where I got my love for storytelling as well. Um, and then my father's parents, I wasn't as close with them, but they were around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Grandmother on your mom's side, did she have any creative flowing through her?
Not that I know of. My grandmother was an interesting woman. She had a lot of issues as a child, I think. She had a tough family life that she, carried with her whole life.
Yeah.
Was never quite able to let that go. And she, I don't know, I think she just wasn't a very happy person. And she didn't allow herself to enjoy life as much as she probably could have.
Yeah. I get that. I had a grandmother on my father's side that was kind of like that, similarly. Um, she had quite a bit of I would say rough Southern upbringing in terms of not a whole lot of income flowing through and that type of thing. So I get it. During that time frame, there's a lot of scenarios in society and in family
Yeah.
that there was a whole lot of lack going on.
Yeah.
So,
I think she lost her mom early and she had to raise her, a lot of her brothers and sisters herself.
oh
She was one of the
wow,
oldest. She
yeah,
wasn't the oldest, but she was one of the oldest. And her father was not a nice person and an alcoholic and, all the
okay,
things. So, yeah.
yeah, I get it. 7 years difference between you and your brother.
Mm.
I completely understand what that's like. I have a younger sister that's 9 years younger.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I had 9 years of being the main one. I did have an older sister that's 7 years older, but she was from my father's first marriage, so she's a half sister. But
Hmm.
I always just considered her my sister.
Yeah.
I always wanted to hang out with her and look up to her, all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
she was always lived with her mom in Tennessee, where both of our families are from, sides of our family are from. And so I didn't really get to see her a whole lot growing up, mostly just through vacations and holidays and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
it always felt like I was getting to see my sister for a long period of time.
Mm.
It's always exciting for me.
Yeah.
With being that single kid for so long, were you one of the kids who would veer towards the back of the classroom uh, in elementary, or did you want to be a little bit more of the attention grabber?
No, I wanted to hide. I didn't want I didn't want to ever have anyone call on me.
Yeah.
If I could have just sat in the corner and read a book the whole time, that would have made me very happy.
Nice. So the interaction was very minimal and only what was required.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
I think a lot of creatives have that sense of wanting to just not be seen because they have so much going on in our minds all the time
Yeah.
that it's interesting to navigate through that. Did you have many friends in elementary school that were ones that you were close to that you connected with really well with?
I did. I made my best friend for my whole elementary school years in kindergarten, and we were together through fifth grade. Then we went to separate schools, and then after that, we kind of drifted apart a little bit. But yeah, we met in kindergarten and we connected right away. She had really pretty long hair. I just remember noticing like I really loved her hair.
Yeah.
And so that was like a conversation starter. And yeah,
Okay.
we used to just hang out all the time.
How about any extracurricular activities like music or sports or anything like that as a kid?
So I took Oh, it's really funny, actually. I was just writing about this for my own podcast because I had a dancer on my show. She's also a writer, but she's a dancer. And I was like, I wonder if I'll have anything to talk to this woman about because as a kid, I got kicked out of dance class for just being bad, I guess.
Really?
So, yeah, I went to back then it was like ballet, tap, jazz. You took all three or whatever,
Yeah.
and I don't even know why I wanted to do it. It doesn't sound like something I would have probably gravitated towards, but for some reason I did it. And then my mother loved to tell the story. I don't really have a memory of this, but my mother loved to tell the story that the teacher told her not to waste her money. And so I did not go back to dance.
Wow, that's pretty harsh.
Right?
That's
So
pretty
after
harsh.
that, I went to take piano lessons, which I did for like 10 years. I started when I was five or something.
Okay.
And then, yeah, I practiced into high school.
Do you still play it all?
I don't, and I keep thinking I want to go back to it. When I left, when I stopped doing it, it was kind of because it had become it wasn't fun anymore. My mother
Yeah.
made it not fun. Like she made
Right.
it like if you don't practice for this amount of, time, then you're grounded, all that stuff. And
Yeah.
so it lost its fun. And then she changed. my teacher. So the last 2 years, I ended up going to a different teacher, and this teacher was a nun, and I was mortified. I was like, it's bad enough you put me in Catholic school. Now I have to go after school and learn how to play the same song for 2 years from a nun. No. And so I basically said, if you don't let me quit, something bad's going to happen to this nun.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
but I
Was
feel like I would have loved to, if it had been fun, I would have kept with it. And I do feel the urge sometimes to go back to it now.
well, I think at this point you could be a little bit more free and creative.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was the Catholic school all girls?
Hmm. My high
Okay.
school was, yeah. So my parents took me out of public school after fifth grade. So for middle school, I went to a co-ed Catholic school, and then I went to a all-girls Catholic high school, which was, I'm not, just for the record, I do not identify as Catholic.
Okay.
If anything, I'm a recovering Catholic, and I don't look back on those years with fond memories at all.
Got you. All right. So if we navigate through that a little bit, was there anything in public school in terms of maybe some of your teachers that recognized something in you early on that they wanted to encourage, or maybe were a little bit more kinder to you, knowing that you were quiet?
I mean, I remember in like fifth grade, I had a really nice teacher in fifth grade, who, I don't know that he did anything special, but I just remember him being just a really welcoming person to be around. And the way he taught was not overbearing. And he seemed to, kind of treat everyone the same in the class. Um,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I think that was the year that I did write a short story that I got some pretty good accolades for by him. So
All right. And do you remember what that short story was about back then?
I do. It was about, I don't remember a lot. I do remember it was about a couple that ended up getting stranded in a car in the winter and they got frostbite and somebody lost a foot or something. It was always a little weird. I don't remember why they were in the car or what actually happened, but I remember the frostbite and the losing of a limb.
Hey, any story at that age is fascinating. I mean,
Yeah,
just to have the creativity to think that way. Um, may have been inspired by something that your grandfather said about one of his cases.
maybe.
Um, I remember when I was in second grade, I had seen the Planet of the Apes movie,
Hmm.
one of the first ones that had come out, and we had to write a short story in class, and I wrote about monkeys.
Yeah.
There's many different things that influence us at that age where we're just, it may not seem normal
Yeah.
to be writing about, but it's just what
But
we
it is what
have
it
in our
is, right?
mind. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. Um, did you realize at that point in time that that might be something that you really wanted to continue doing
I knew way before that, I think.
way before?
Yeah.
Okay. How,
Yeah, I was
how much
so
farther back?
as long as I can remember, I loved books so much. So one of the benefits of being an only child for 7 years was that I had all my mother's attention. And, back then, um, it was typical for mothers to put aside their careers and stay home with the kids, right? So she had stopped teaching while I was young and she stayed home. So every morning we would get up and she would read me books until my father got up and she had to go deal with him. And I remember being so annoyed when he would get up. I'm like, she's going to stop reading to me now? Like, what the hell? Right?
Right?
But I loved books. And then, as soon as I could read them on my own, I just would devour them. And then she had this old typewriter, and I used to sit at her desk and take her books and type chapters out to see what it felt like to write chapters. Because I don't know, I just always knew I was going to be a writer.
Really?
Yeah.
That's fascinating. And at what age were you when you started doing the typing?
Well, probably, I don't know. I was probably like, it was after my brother was around. So 8, 9,
Okay.
10. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting from the perspective of, I would imagine it was more of a manual typewriter
Yeah.
at that point in time, not
Hmm.
electric, right?
Yeah, not electric, no.
Okay. So even that process is very, it has to be very methodical
Mm.
to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Interested in writing and also typing.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought that you may have done this before?
No, I actually
Okay.
didn't.
No? All right.
That's cool.
I was going in that woo-woo direction from your
Yeah.
intro. I thought,
No, that's cool though. I know I never thought about that. I mean, I've thought about past lives for sure. I love all that stuff. But yeah, and I usually think of it like, oh, well, what bad thing happened to me in the past, right? That made me this way. I never thought about like the good part. That maybe I'm a writer.
right, true. We usually do go to the all the bad things like, what did I do before? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Was I burned at the stake? Like what happened?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. All right. If we're moving into junior high, you're getting pivoted out of public school into Catholic school, but yet it's co-ed.
Yeah.
Was that a huge um, kind of hit to your social norm that you were used to at that point in elementary?
I mean, it wasn't so much, I think. I don't know that I would say it was a hit to my social norm. I don't think I really knew what a social norm was back then. I
Okay.
had a few friends in grammar school that I liked and hung out with and whatever, but I was just really angry that I was going to a Catholic school. Like I didn't buy into my parents' religion from a very young age.
Okay.
They didn't have a good reason for wanting me to go there, except that if I had stayed in public school, that I would either become a drug addict or sell drugs. I have no idea why they were obsessed with drugs because I've never touched drugs in my life. But like
Okay.
they were like, no, you'll be a drug addict if you go to public school. So the whole thing was just bizarre. Um, but I think it was more about they wanted to kind of maintain control for as long as possible, and they thought if I got sucked into the religion thing, that could be a good way to do it.
Right. Right. Yeah, I get it. I get it. Did any of your classmates from elementary end up going to the same school or no? Did you have to
No,
make
I
all new
just,
friends?
yeah, no, I made all new friends.
Oh man,
Yeah.
I can imagine that added to that anger.
Yeah. I mean, I usually didn't have trouble making friends. It wasn't that I had more of a problem believing that I had very low self-esteem. So I made friends easily, but I never really believed that people actually liked me. Like I thought I had to keep earning the friendship for some
Okay.
reason. Yeah. And that is something that's followed me through my life.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Was that is that based off of a specific instance or scenario that you can remember of where you felt you needed to earn something in order to get some attention?
Yeah. I'm going to be one of those people who goes back to my, mother issues. But
Okay.
But no, I've been doing a lot of I mean, I've been doing a lot of work my whole life on myself, but over the past couple of years I have really learned a lot about the way I grew up and why I am the way I am. And
Hmm.
I ended up in a 12-step program for codependency, which I
Okay.
realized I learned from my mother is I never knew kind of why she was the way she was. I've come to understand that she's very codependent. And I just learned all these behaviors from her that are now like
Gotcha.
ingrained in me that I have to work really hard to get rid of.
Yeah. Understandable. Completely understandable. And also too, the the structure of the private school on top of that is like an additional
Yeah.
control system and mechanism that gets
Mhm.
put in place. I understand that very well. I ended up having to go to a private Christian school in fourth grade after going to public school up until then, which was for me it was really nice because the school that I attended was only 3 houses away
Hmm.
from where we lived. So I was able to just walk up the street and go to school every morning, and after school just come right home. Um, and I was able to, make some friends. I was a quiet kid too, but I was able to make some friends who felt like good friends at that age. Being in third grade, that's not. We don't really know what a true good friend is, but felt they were people that we could see every day and we could talk to and interact with. Um, and then, yeah, having to switch schools. I did know a few of the people that were going to be at that school just because of, my parents going to church and that kind of thing. I would see them there, but I wasn't leaving my friends that I would see every day. So that was definitely a difficult scenario. So I understand how that is having to
Yeah.
transfer in. Um, did you make some new friends at this co-ed phase of your life that may have carried again into high school,
I
being
did
the
actually.
only girls in the high school?
I did. Yeah. I made a few good friends that I still to this day actually see. And I'm not somebody who gets, I don't like reunions. I don't like going back to that. But I do have a couple of girlfriends from, um, one of them's actually from, I met her in sixth grade when I transferred. And then the other one I met in my first year of high school. And we still are friends to this day.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice. Did um, did high school, in terms of it being all girls school, did it allow for any of that writing to kind of expand and grow, or was it mainly structured to your basic courses?
It was structured to basic courses, but I knew what excited me, and I knew like I loved my literature classes, obviously, right? So cliche.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I think it was in junior year of high school when I really like realized, oh, I'm like good at this. So I had this teacher. I talk about this lady all the time. Her name was Sister Virginia. She was
Okay.
horrible. Like she was horrible. And she just was angry, one of those angry nuns, probably
Yeah.
because she made a bad life choice by becoming a nun. But so we did this paper on Tale of Two Cities, and I was so excited. I loved the book. I read I was super excited about I was such a nerd, excited about writing this paper, put all this time into it. I was so proud of this paper, turn it in, wait for my grade to come back. And when it came back, she'd given me a C minus. And I was like, oh fuck. It was so and usually, like, I was quiet and I didn't like to rock the boat. I was afraid of getting in trouble, all the things. But I was like, no. So after class, I went up to her desk and I was like, dude, what the hell, basically. And
Yeah.
she said, well, this paper's just too good. You couldn't have written it. I'm sure you used the Cliff Notes or plagiarize. She
Ah,
basically accused me of plagiarizing the paper because it was so good. And I was like, you couldn't have just asked, right?
right.
She did change my grade. She's still a jerk, but I was like, oh, I guess I am pretty good at this.
What she end up giving you after you questioned it?
She gave me an A minus. I think the
Okay.
minus was that, she had to still have a little bit of
Right.
control over it, right?
Yeah, but at least it went from the C minus to an A minus.
Yeah.
That's a big jump.
Yeah.
Uh, you must have pleaded your case pretty well.
Well, I was just so like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like if it was math class, like totally, because I can tell you the only reason I passed sophomore year geometry was because I sat next to a girl who was really good at it and who would always push her paper over so I could see what she was doing. I wouldn't have even argued with them if they had called me out on that, but nobody ever called me out on passing geometry. But you
Right.
call me out on something I know I'm good at? No.
Yeah. A- Another interesting component as well is that you had enough inside of you to stick up for yourself,
Yeah.
which I want to highlight that for you because you mentioned that you've done a whole lot of work with your own personal self in terms of codependent scenarios. But yet, there's an example early on of where you stick up for yourself.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Because I didn't really think about it because codependents don't do that. Right.
Right. No, exactly. That's why. That's why I'm highlighting that. That's why I wanted to bring that up for you. Um, very fascinating.
Mm.
Very fascinating. Um, were there any other of the nuns that may have shown you any bit of kindness throughout those 4 years of high school?
There was another one that was nice. Her name is Sister Sue, and she used to she it sounds kind of weird, and maybe it was, I don't know, I never went, but she used to have some of the students over for like sleepovers and she would like play music, and do like, so some of my friends would go and they always said it was like amazing. I was never interested in spending more time with nuns than I had to, so I never did, but she
Yeah,
was really nice to everyone pretty much. So she was fine. But I mean, I didn't really resonate with any of it. There was a teacher in she was not a nun, but they weren't all nuns, but my AP English teacher in my senior year, she was lovely and she was really complimentary, and you had to do certain things and get certain grades to get into the AP class or whatever. So she knew that she had a class full of people who knew what they were doing, and she treated us like that, which was
yeah,
nice. So that was a good experience.
very good, very good. Um, did you have the opportunity to do any kind of contests or anything like that that were around writing it throughout high school at all?
Trying to remember. I probably did, but I don't know. I don't think I took advantage of a lot of that stuff. High school was a very angsty time for me. Like, I didn't want
Gotcha.
to be there. I didn't get along with my family at all. Like, I remember just being miserable for a lot of those years, honestly.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you this, and this is only because of my own personal experience. Did you have a sense that some of the stuff that you are being told um, from that Catholic perspective wasn't quite resonating as full truth to you?
Yeah, I knew that when I was 7 years old.
Okay. All right. There we go. Yes.
Yeah,
Same.
yeah.
Very
It's
much.
wild, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Because even in the environment I was in fundamental Baptist. So it's
Mm,
a little bit different than Catholicism. Um, but yet it still has its own stringent way of putting things forth.
yeah,
Um, and I always felt that was like, okay, I understand that. That story seems real. And then they would say something else in relation to the story, and it would be like, that doesn't sound like it goes together,
yeah,
or it doesn't feel like it's all the whole truth of
yeah.
what I'm being told. So I always had that as well. So I understand that very much.
Yeah,
Um,
for me, it was like my mother, well, my parents were very, I'm sure they learned it from their parents, but they were the kinds of Catholics that talked about how Catholics were the superior religion and that no
mhm.
other religion mattered. And I remember like they would say that all the time, maybe not in those words, but I would get that gist from very young. And I
Yeah,
remember we were in the car one day, and I was pretty young, like 7 or 8, and we were probably going to church. I don't know. Um, and I just was like really thinking about this because I'm like, that doesn't, like you said, that story just doesn't make sense because, and I
yeah,
think the way I put it to them was, so then like what happens to like the Jewish people? Do they just fall in a black hole when they die? Right. Because they would say like only Catholics go to heaven and all this crap. And like, I'm like, so what? Everyone else just falls into a hole and no one, they're just gone. Like it, and they got so mad. When I asked that question, they couldn't answer it. They got mad. They told me to shut up. And that was like the end of it. And I'm like, yeah, this is bullshit.
yeah. The inquisitive mind always gets shut down.
Yeah. Yeah, but then also a lot of it for me too was the hypocrisy, which I'm sure you've seen too, right? My mother, church every day. I'm this wonderful mother, and then she would first of all treat me like a piece of shit, but then she would, I would see her. She'd come out of church, she'd get in the car, and somebody from another race would cut her off, and she would have a choice thing to say about that with a not nice name, and I'm like, that doesn't really go with what you're just telling me you learned in church.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It, it's always disappointing
Yeah,
from my perspective when I encounter other individuals that have experienced religious upbringings Um, and it's always felt um, incomplete for them in terms of what they were hearing, what they were being told, and the way that they were told they had to act. But yet, there would be plenty of examples of where it was contradictory within those environments. Um, and it affects us so much growing up that trying to unravel that type of stuff in adulthood, it becomes this confusing thing in and of itself, because as you get older you start to experience the world as it is, and you see different things that are going on out there. You started seeing other religions that come popping up and you're like, oh, that's interesting, what is that about? And you're like, oh, okay, I see some similarities, but again, doesn't seem like they have the complete answer either. Um, and just trying to rationalize within ourselves what that essence of spirituality is for us. And I'm talking spirituality over religion,
Yeah.
because I think there's a completely different
Oh, for sure.
element to that.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I think as creatives, we have a natural instinct to spiritual things,
Mm,
because our creativity is a spiritual practice in a sense.
yeah.
If we're looking at it as we've been given the gift of the creator, able to create, able to manifest and imagine worlds and different things like that. That's that spiritual component of creating. I think it just becomes a scenario where I'm always like, oh man, another one that had to go through that.
Mm,
But also too, with this platform that I have, I can share that you're not alone, right?
yeah.
Somebody else went through that. Not as extreme as Catholic school, but in an extreme in another form.
Yeah.
So understand the conflict of the mind, the angst that wants to build up, especially into high school,
Yeah.
when you're like starting to get to that adulthood phase, and you're like, wait a second, I want to fight against this a little bit stronger,
Yeah.
because it doesn't make sense to me completely.
Yeah.
So when you're getting towards the end of high school, let's say that after that first semester of senior year, had you started thinking about potentially going off to college at that point in time?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love school. So I didn't love high school, but I wanted to,
You
definitely
wanted to
do
learn.
the college thing. And I
Okay.
ended up going on to grad school. Um, I do love school when I get to choose the school, but also for college, I didn't know what I didn't know back then, right? And my parents were not, for some reason, like I was always really a really good student. My mother used to talk about my high IQ, and she would say it in such a way that it sounded like a positive, but she made it sound negative almost. Like, I don't know,
Really? Okay.
it was a weird thing. But they, basically said to me, there was no conversation. They were like, well, here's the state schools, pick one kind of thing. And I didn't think like, gee, there's got to be more to life than a state school. I didn't really know what to do. And I didn't know how to like navigate it if they weren't going to pay. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I let them kind of bully me into going to a state school, which was fine. I ended up going to Salem State, loved it. It was amazing. My only regret was that I didn't live there. Um,
Ah,
yeah, that
yeah.
was a mistake. That was a
Okay.
mistake for sure.
And when you chose that school, did they have did they have the writing environment that you really wanted to step into?
I mean, they had an English program, which was the best I could do back then without going to a fancier school, which I didn't even know I was like allowed to look at, right?
Or,
And I remember when my when I told my father or my parents, I guess both of them, that I was going to major in English because that was, like I said, the best, the closest fit that I could find to what I wanted to do. My father said, "Oh, that's nice. What are you going to do with that?" And I said, "Well, obviously, I'm going to be a writer." And he said, "It's nice, but also, you should think about being a teacher because you need a backup plan." And, I know that he didn't mean any malice with it, but also that was like the attitude back then. And as much as I was like, oh, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, and I still went off and did my thing, like that gets ingrained in your brain, right? And
Yes.
and you go through, for me anyways, I went through life thinking, well, yeah, my books are great and I'll try to figure this out, but also I have to have a real job. And so I really think it prevented me from going all in on my dream.
Okay. Okay. How was the environment of being in Catholic school to being in state college, where now you're expected into every facet of society possible, basically?
Yeah, it felt amazing. Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right. That's all right to jump in. If it felt amazing, let's explore that a little more. Can you describe some of the first instances where you were like, oh, now this is the thing that I've been looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I just met all different kinds of people from everywhere, and I got to take classes that I could pick for the most part, right? I mean, there were certain things you had to take or whatever, but I got to pick the ones that looked interesting to me.
Okay.
I got to have conversations with people about literature. Like I always had craved that. I wanted somebody to meet me at an intellectual level. My
Yeah.
dad was very intellectual, but we weren't similar in the things that we read or,
Yeah.
consumed. So we never really had that together. But now I could have people who, had read this book and we could talk about it, or, a teacher who introduced me to something that changed my life, or yeah,
Right.
it was eye-opening for sure.
And how was it in terms of making friends at that level?
Yeah, I made friends. Like I never really had an issue making friends. Again, the only thing I can say that I wish I had done differently besides living there um, was I always was rushing in and out. I was commuting. I did have a friend, so she lived in my town, but I didn't meet her until I met her at school. So we
Yeah.
ended up commuting together, which was fun. So we became really close. But I was always like rushing, out of class and going back to, where I live to go to work or whatever. So I didn't let myself have, or I wasn't allowed or didn't let myself both maybe to have that experience really of spending a lot of time even just hanging out with other commuters, right? Or,
Yeah.
so I do regret that.
Okay. With the type of work that you were having to do to help fund your schooling, was it anything that you were really interested in, or was it just a job to get some money?
Yeah, no, I worked at a grocery store. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. And were you a cashier or?
I did a lot of things because I worked there for a long time. So actually started working there when I was 14. My mother somehow
Oh,
got the
really?
manager to let me work there a few hours a week when I was 14, and I stayed there until I graduated. So I went from being a cashier to being a courtesy desk person to produce. I mean, that was like the crowning glory when I got to produce. That meant I could go in the back room and not have to deal with customers.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's great. Um, another, from my perspective, another example of you taking charge of your existence, essentially moving moving up within the ranks of that environment. Um, you have to have a little bit of go-getter attitude to do that. Even with the point of getting into produce and being able to not have to be around all the customers. Um, I imagine that was a little bit of a breath of fresh air from
Yeah,
being on the main floor all the time, where you're
for
having to
sure.
interact instantly. But
For sure.
even moving yourself into that role of taking that on, and being confident enough to keep moving and doing those things, that says a lot too about the individual that you were at that point in time.
Yeah.
The strategy moving through to the later years of college and getting towards that time of when you're about to graduate and having to decide and focus more on what you're really going to do once you cross that stage and get the diploma. Had you thought any further? Were you only still thinking, oh man, I'm probably going to have to go teach?
No, I knew I was never going to teach. I didn't really know how it was going to play out, but I knew I was never going to teach like
Okay.
like a classroom setting. I shouldn't say that because I do teach a class now, but it's an online class. My
Yeah.
parents actually meant like go in a classroom and teach that way, which I have all the
Correct.
respect in the world for teachers, but it was never my thing. Like I never had that desire to do that. I don't even like kids, to be honest. I really don't. So I was
That's
like, nah.
another interesting thing. All right. I'm making note of that.
Yeah. So no, but I kind of, funny when you talk about the work thing, like I had one goal when I was in college. I mean, aside from doing well and in getting my diploma, um, my goal was to make enough money to get the hell out of my house because I was still living there.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I ended up I moved out my first year. I moved in with a friend. That didn't work out so well. I ended up moving back home. So I had a couple of years of moving out, moving back, moving out, moving back. And then
Okay.
there was one year or one semester that I actually went part-time because I was trying to just work to save up to move. So I don't think I did myself any favors by doing it that way, but I really just felt so trapped in still
Yeah.
being at home that I was like, all right, I got to get out of here. That's the biggest issue to deal with right now.
Sure.
Um, and then, of course, I ended up meeting the wrong person, and um, I moved in with this guy when I was still in college. And I had a full-time job at that point. I was working nights. I mean, I was working during the day, going to school at night to finish my degree, whatever. And then, yeah, I stayed at the job I was at. It wasn't a job related to anything. It wasn't the grocery store, but it was like an office job. It wasn't related to anything I wanted to do. But
Okay.
again, it was comfortable and codependence like comfort. And
Yeah.
so I made decent money there and I was like, all right, this is good for right now. And then I did start writing when I was doing like writing books because I was going to grad school also. And I did start kind of dabbling in writing, but as far as like actual job, I wasn't doing anything related to what I wanted to do. And of course, I married the wrong person. And that was a shit show for a few years until I got out of that. But in the middle of all that, I got my grad degree. I wrote my first novel as my thesis for my grad school diploma.
Okay.
And then I decided that I was going to start writing crime fiction. So I went down that path.
Got you. And at that point, was your grandfather, was he still around, even if he may not have been doing the detective work at that point?
He passed away the summer before I started grad school.
Okay. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I imagine that was a difficult experience, especially if that was where a lot of your inspiration, creative inspiration would come from.
It was. I mean, and it was also difficult because my mother kind of threw a we were still close, my grandfather and I, but my mother had kind of thrown a wrench in our relationship too because she knew we were close and
Okay.
she had a little bit of a grudge against me for how I had gone about things. And so yeah, it was it was what it was, but he and I were still very close.
Okay. Okay. With this first novel that you're writing, the concept of it, did that just come to you out of your own creativity, or was there something that you were basing it off of that gave you the inspiration to step into it?
You mean my thesis novel or my
Yeah.
real? Okay, yeah, my thesis novel was very bad. It should never come out of the school library where it lives. But it was more of a women's fiction. I wasn't really sure what I was doing at that point. So, but I think I knew the path that my marriage was on. And I ended up
Okay.
writing my first novel about a domestic violence victim. And so, yeah, but it was pretty bad.
In
I mean,
terms
it was
of,
complete though. I mean, it was a 300-page novel. It fit the
okay.
bill. Got me my degree. So yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say it had to be somewhat good in order for you to get out of school with it.
Would I want anyone to read it now? Probably not.
Well, hey, there's always the opportunity to go back and rewrite,
Yeah.
potentially, if that, you know, comes across your mind. I think that's the beauty of part of creation that we all do as, artists, writers, musicians, even dancers or other fields, fashion, those early things that we create, if we hold on to them as, portfolio pieces, or just because, yeah, that was the first thing that you created, so you want to hang on to it.
Mm.
Um, I think we can always look back at that and be inspired to, you know, change it, take it further than we did, um, different things like that. Um, and I don't think a lot of us look back at those things and feel that they're worthy to, be expanded upon it a lot of times.
Yeah.
I know for myself, like one of the first garments I ever designed was a goalkeeper's jersey because I played soccer.
Hmm.
And at that point in time, uh, I couldn't afford to buy a real keeper's jersey.
Hmm.
So I designed it, drew it up the way I wanted to. Um, my mom took me to the store and we picked out a pattern that would kind of look like what I had drawn up so we could at least adapt the pattern. And then she was skilled enough at sewing that we were able to, alter that pattern and make what I had drawn up.
Cool.
Um, and as I look back at it now, because I still have it, there's all kinds of things that I would do differently now,
Yeah.
knowing what I know about technology and different functionality with clothing and different things like that. So yeah, I mean, there's always opportunity there to expand on something that's because I don't feel that an original creation from the beginning is just a throwaway piece,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think it has its purpose at that point in time. And who knows? I mean, there may be even nuggets in there if you went back and read it again to where you're like, oh, wow, that's hitting me different now because you're at a different stage in life, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
man,
I do think about those characters sometimes. And actually, I was cleaning out my office not too long ago, and I found some old notes
okay,
from that book, which I was like, where did these even come from? And just the little snippets, I did kind of look at some of the snippets and go, oh, that's not too bad.
right, right. Oh yeah, yeah. Of course, it couldn't have been too bad. You graduated around that. Um, Within this relationship that didn't really function the way that it should have for you, did you have writing during that time as an outlet for yourself,
Hmm.
in terms of journaling or different things like that?
So it's funny, during that period of time, I didn't really journal. I mean, I was in school during a lot of that. So I did do, I was writing short stories, I was writing this novel.
Right.
I had all kinds of school work type things to write. I didn't journal a lot back then. And looking back, I think it's because I knew that if I did, it would be read, and I
Got
didn't want to take that chance.
smart, very smart. Again, another highlight of point to where you as the individual was controlling your own internal self. You had control over that
Yeah.
and you were protecting that.
Yeah.
Even even as codependent as it may have gotten at that point in time in life for you, I'm seeing through your story there's these little glimpses of where you are the independent individual. Like there's many people who do not have that kind of experience and go through that type of relationship scenario, that have that internal being part of their soul that kind of intuitively says, no, I'm not going to be controlled this way, or I'm going to protect myself in this way by not doing this or not doing that. Different things. Like a lot of times when you fall into that, because I know at one point in time I was in a relationship where it was potentially going in that direction, and finally realized after not recognizing who I was as a creative person, because I was almost doing nothing creative towards the end of it, did I realize that, wait a second, I'm losing myself. And a lot of times within those environments, that individual gets lost and gets in too far to where they have to really, really, really work to find themselves again. But what I'm saying from your story is there's this internal uh, element of Liz that is consistently still being self autonomous and wanting to do for Liz. And that having that clarity just within that aspect is it's very um, telling about the strength and resiliency that you have as a creative moving through these different environments that you have. And I want you to be able to recognize that within
Thank you.
this conversation.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Um, the scenario at which you realized full on that you needed to move out of that relationship, was there a specific instance where you fully stood up and took charge and said, all right, I'm done. This is not, it's not moving forward with
Yeah.
me involved in it.
Yeah, and it took a long time. And it's funny that like to go back to what you just said, I was writing during this whole period, but I also felt like I had lost my creativity at some point. Like I was writing, but I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. I was also working at the time as a freelance journalist. So I
Okay.
was doing that type of writing as well. I had left that other office job at that point, and I was focused on journalism. I was focused on actually volunteering. I worked with a cat shelter. I took that super seriously. And so I
Okay.
was doing all of that. But I did feel like I was writing, but I wasn't going anywhere. I felt like I was just spinning around in a circle. And I really attribute that to being in that environment. So between my family, in this relationship and like even some of the friendships that I had, it just was all stifling me,
Yeah.
you know? And then there were so many things that could have been a no moment for so many years, but then I remember that it was really a stupid thing that finally I was like,
Okay.
I'm just so done. I had a friend from out of state visiting. She was staying over for a week or so, and it was right after Christmas. And the I think it was New Year's Day. And for some reason, New Year's Day was the day that we had to take everything down and put it away and clean and be insane, right?
Right.
Despite the fact that we had a guest and, all the things. So I just remember like that morning, my friend and I were going to go out and do something. And then all of a sudden, it just went crazy of like, we got to take the street down and there's pine needles all over the floor. And like, it was just this whole thing. I mean, it wasn't anything more than that, but
Yeah.
just the whole like Christmas decorations, vacuuming like a madman. I'm like, I can't live in this house anymore. Like, I'm
Yeah.
done.
Right.
And it was just the stupidest thing, It wasn't any of the real. I could tell you some stories and you would be like, well, why wasn't that the no moment? No, the no moment was like, I have a friend here. I'm completely embarrassed because suddenly we are turning into Mr. Clean and we have to vacuum up all the pine needles right now or the world's going to end.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah. It's, it's amazing too that it was you recognize the fact that this is really dumb, right?
Yes.
Like it could have waited to the second.
Yeah.
Easily could have waited to the second. Like so many. I mean, there's people that wait till March before they take their Christmas stuff down. Um, but yeah, that's fascinating. Um, since this platform is around scenarios of mental health, and I don't want to push that if it's something you don't want to get into. Um, but the question I would have is, you said there's a couple of other scenarios where you'd have been like, wait, why wasn't that the scenario where you decided to step out of? Would you be open to sharing one of those just for the audience that may
Yeah,
um, be able
absolutely.
to relate?
Absolutely. Because I have done work in the domestic violence space after this.
Okay.
It took me, I will say, it took me when I was in the middle of it, I didn't know that I could refer to myself as a domestic violence survivor, right? Because I wasn't getting punched in the face. I
Mhm.
didn't know that you could be abused in different ways, right? That were just as meaningful. And so it took almost a complete stranger to point it out to me a couple of years after I was out of the marriage to be like, oh, yeah, I guess maybe that was that was true, right?
Yeah.
But that aside, I mean, my ex was just he was a rager,
Okay.
and he was loud and angry and he would call you terrible names and throw shit and break things. And I remember he got angry at me because he did something for my old boss at the time, and he didn't do a good job on it. He used to do body work for cars,
Okay.
and he was doing something. I don't even remember what the scenario, but I remember I was kind of embarrassed about what had happened. I said something to my boss. He just got mad and he took the phone, the cordless phone at the time, because that's what you had back then, and
Yeah.
he just like hurled it at the glass door. And I just remember thinking like, why would you do that? you know, but I
Yeah.
didn't walk out of the room. I didn't walk out of the house. Like, so yeah, there were a lot of moments like that. I mean, punching holes in the walls and having to spend I mean there were many weekends where he had to spend with the plaster and the paint patching up his temper fits from the prior week.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Um, because I do believe that that is being willing to share. That does help people, even though we may not ever see it.
Yeah.
Um, I know that from my personal experiences with dealing with mental health struggles and stuff like that. Um, a lot of times I have no idea who may hear it or, you know, who may listen to anything and may help them or when and where
Yeah.
types of things. But I've always been willing to be completely open about my journey because I feel if it's just one person,
Yeah.
then fine.
Yeah.
That makes it even better. Um, once you get out of that relationship, does the sense of being able to breathe and being able to feel free to create, does that come back to you almost instantaneously, or does it take some time to refigure out who you were at that point?
Yeah, it's interesting because of course, as a codependent that I didn't know that I was back then, I ended up right in another relationship. But this one was going to be different, right? Because it was with a creative person, and we could be creative together. This is what I was telling myself, and there were a lot of times, and that was true, and it was, it was a good, positive relationship most of the time. But yeah, so that person actually introduced me to Julia Cameron's The Artist Way,
Ah, yes.
and I had to go through that book a few times, and I really credit that book for helping me figure out all the things and really get back to what I wanted to do and who I knew I was. And it's funny now looking back because obviously it's a 12-step program for writers, right? And now that I've been through a 12-step program, I'm like, oh yeah, I can see that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the other interesting fact is he's the one who's introducing it to you.
My other ex-partner, yes.
Right. So again, a scenario of a contrary potential situation that comes about. But sometimes I look at those as um, I call them God wings.
Yeah.
Those little moments where something takes place that just moves you in a different direction. But even though it's coming from probably the most obscure resource that you
Yeah.
would think would be doing that, um, it ends up being the thing that is the trajectory changer.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Um, and I commend you too for going through that book a few times. I have it. I have the workbook. I have not been able to get through it.
It's hard. It's a lot.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot when you start to, if you try to focus on every single aspect of it, um, it becomes overwhelming real fast.
Yeah.
So definitely, again, another strength component within yourself of, and it may just be that internal drive to be creative and be autonomous and be the writer that you are, the creator of worlds, the creator of language, so to speak, in the way that you're writing. Um, that is giving you this determination to get to a place of breaking chains that
Mm.
seem to keep attaching to you
Yeah.
through over the years. Once you're doing that, as well as working within this journalism field, did the journalism inspire any kind of um, maybe research bug in you that you may have seen from your grandfather working as a detective?
Yeah, I mean, I loved going down the rabbit hole of interest. I didn't get so when I was so at that point I had moved to a different state. I was living down in Connecticut and I was working full time for a newspaper and but I was the city reporter. I wasn't the crime reporter, sadly. But,
Right,
so I was reporting on, town council meetings, but I didn't get to do the fun stuff. But whenever, I could get involved in some kind of a crime story, I was all about it. And there was one, I remember there was a story that there was a scientist that had gotten murdered a couple of years or a year before I had moved there. And
mm,
I don't know, the story kept coming back up for some reason. And one of my colleagues was covering some kind of follow-up. And I just remember like going down all these rabbit holes of like, well, he could have been killed because of it, because he was studying apparently something that was a little controversial. And, so of course all of the things are swirling around like, ooh, somebody must have murdered him. Because it seemed like I think it was categorized like a hit and run or something or a burglary. I can't even remember the whole story, but it was not a homicide. It was not ruled as a homicide, but I was like, no, that had to be a homicide. I was like
right, right.
determined to find out why someone had killed. So yes, I've always been obsessed with murder and all of that stuff. Yeah.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Um, when you started to decide, I'm really going to step into writing, and the writing that I'm going to do is going to be based around um, mysteries, fictional things, or mysteries that are realistic, that type of scenario. When did that hit you that I'm really going to do this? I'm going to really step into this.
Yeah, so it was right after grad school. I was like, all right, cool, I did that. And now what? You know?
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about like, what do I want to write? And then I had like that duh moment because I'm like, well, I love reading crime stories, so why don't I go write them? So and I had an idea already. So so that office job that I had been at for a long
Yeah.
time, my friend who owned that company ended up leaving that job. It was an electrical contracting company.
Oh,
He ended up leaving to go buy a funeral home because that was his dream that he always wanted to. Yeah. And
wow.
so I was fascinated with that. So I'm like, let me come do some stuff with you. so
Right.
so I got really sucked into that whole quirky funeral lifestyle. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to write a series about a funeral home. So I started doing that, and then at the same time, I was like, I got to find like I got to figure out how to do this. So I started looking up crime and mystery conferences.
Hmm.
And I found one that was like right in my backyard at the time. And so I started going to that conference. It's a conference I still go to this day. It's the New England Crime Bake. Um, and yeah, I just started to meet people and just soak up everything I could about the genre and network. And I learned how to pitch and I learned how to talk to agents at the bar and, all the things.
Yeah.
And it took me 10 years, but I got a contract.
Okay. Interesting. How long did you work at the funeral home?
So I just kind of dabbled. So I would go up on, so I started like, I was living in Connecticut, and I started coming up on weekends to do like bookkeeping.
Okay.
And when I was doing that, like, obviously he knew I was there to do like research. So,
Yeah.
they would bring me in on stuff if they could. So like, I remember, one day I was there and his embalmer came up and was like, "Hey, I got to take a pacemaker out of this guy before I bring him to the crematory. You want to come watch?" Like, they would do stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I got to go with them to the crematory and see that whole process, which was super interesting. And just,
Okay.
learning how it worked. I was a huge fan of 6 Feet Under. So
Got you. Yeah.
it was fascinating for me.
Well, what's cool about it as well, from my perspective, I'm sure there's other listeners out there that may find this fascinating as well, but it's real life experience about a process that most of us never see or even think about,
Yeah.
right? Like, who would think about they got to take that pacemaker out of that body before we bury it or
Yeah.
cremate it, right? But that's a thing, has to happen.
Yeah.
But those real world experiences and you being able to participate in them just because of an opportunity allows for you to be able to, I would venture to say, write from a perspective that may be strictly fictional, potentially, but you get to weave in these elements of truth
Mhm.
that really happened so it would enhance the whole storyline.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, for sure. Like, and actually, so I'm still friends with this person, and we had dinner last, I don't know, 6, 7 months ago when I was writing my last book. And he
Okay.
told me this great story. It's great. People think I'm weird. I'm not. But I just find this stuff fascinating. He told me this great story, and I was able to work it into the book that I was working on at the time. So he told me about this person who had come to his funeral home and said, "Hey, I just found out, I got a few months to live, and I want to have a burial at sea, and I don't want you to tell anybody about it. Like, I don't want my wife to know that that's the plan." So, he's like, the funeral directors are discreet. So he's like, okay. So this guy like wanted to literally be buried, not cremated and the ashes thrown, but just buried at sea.
Very see. Yeah.
So apparently it's a whole process. I didn't even know this was a thing you could do, but you can. And it's a whole process. And they have this like, I forget what it's called, but there's a way that they, kind of put something on the body to weigh it down so it
Yeah.
doesn't come back,
Yeah.
right? So they did that to this body, and then my friend gets a call from a medical examiner like months later. He's like, hey, so I have this body that just popped up in the wherever it was. And he's like, and I think we're tracing it back to your funeral.
Oh no.
So long story short, the weights had let go or something.
Yeah.
And so this, half eaten by predators body was like they found
Yeah.
it. They had to go through this whole process to make sure it wasn't somebody who had been murdered and thrown into the ocean.
Sure.
But there's a system that they do to so they can track in case that happens and they can know that there's this body's
Right.
identified. So it was identified back to the funeral home. So he had to go and deal with that. It was kind of a nightmare, but yeah. So I found a way to work that into a book as a subplot of like this person washed up on shore, and was he murdered, was he tied to this other murder that I had been writing
Right.
about? So I'm like, I have to use that. That's brilliant.
For sure. Yeah. I'm listening to this and going back to how you started or the storyline that you people think you're weird. I'm not thinking you're weird. I'm finding it fascinating.
Most people, when
That's
I'm
a
like,
cool
oh, I go
story.
work at my friend's funeral home, they're like, are you like crazy?
But, well, that's the thing too. I mean, they may not just be, they may not have an understanding of creative processes to
Yeah.
know that that's like golden material
Yeah.
to work from. Another aspect of it as well is stepping into that environment. You have to be somewhat conscious of the fact that other people are dealing with something that's very traumatic for them
Yeah.
in that point in time. And to have some kind of involvement within that, you have to have a bit of a caring heart in order to be willing to step into that.
Yeah.
Um, Most of what you said has just been about, handling books and taking care of things like that. Um, but where my head went when you were talking about the guy wanted to be buried at sea, I'm thinking, oh, well, that's a lot of times what happens to sailors.
Yeah.
They're just buried at sea, and that's just part of the process. Um, so I didn't find it odd that he was asking to have that done. The odd part for me was, oh, he didn't want anybody else to know about it. It's like, all right, so are you going to have an empty casket sitting up there in front? Is that what's going to happen?
Yeah, there was a yeah, that was a weird part of the story. And then he had to tell the wife, that and
It's
she didn't know.
shown up
And so
again.
she was like, oh, it's just like him. I guess when he finally got to tell her, she's like, yeah, it's just like him. Don't worry about it. Let's go have a beer, kind of thing.
Yeah,
But yeah, it is interesting because I love the stories because it's not even just about the things like that happen, but it's just the people and how they are and just the nuance of character that I steal relentlessly from things like that.
yeah. I mean, it's just rich material,
Yeah.
like, and you're able to see that as an asset, not just as information that's going to go in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
You hear it, you see it, and you're like, oh, mental note. Let me put that over here in this file.
Yeah.
Um, with that, one of the things that you mentioned a little bit earlier that kind of just got glazed over a little bit was that you worked at a vet. Was it a veterinary hospital or a vet
No.
with cats?
Oh, I know I did I worked in an animal shelter.
Animal shelter.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So working in that environment, I'm imagining again, in order to do that, you have to have a very kind heart to step into that because you're going to see a
Yeah.
um, lot of instances where there's neglect potentially taking place.
Mhm.
How did that impact you during that period of time working in that environment? Did you find it um, joyful and rewarding? Did you find it as inspirational of maybe taking mental notes to write about later? Or was it just the joy of working with animals?
No, it was all of the above because I mean, animals are my passion. Like I love animals. You can see one of my rescue dogs behind.
Yeah.
Um, love animals, and I wanted more of them as a kid, and I didn't get to have them. And so when I finally could do whatever I wanted, I was like, oh, I'm going to have them, and I'm also going to rescue them. And so I went a little off the rails with that too, but it's okay. I saved some lives, so that was good. But
Yeah.
yeah, ultimately, I mean, two of my series are based around animals. So, and a lot of the material I got was from directly working in that space for a long time.
Got you.
Yeah.
When did you decide that you needed to come up with another pen name for your writing?
Yeah, so that wasn't my decision. So I actually never thought that I would publish under my real name because, as you learned at the beginning of this podcast, it's very hard to say. But when I got my first contract, it sort of happened so fast. Like I didn't even think to say, "Hey, let me use a different name." It just happened really fast after a long time of trying. So I was
Okay.
like, "Oh, I guess I'm using my real name." So for my first series, I was using my real name, and then while I was still writing that series, my agent had an opportunity for me to write a second series with a different publisher. As part of that deal, they wanted me to have a different name so they could kind of promote me as a debut name.
Got you. And was there any strategy behind it other than maybe the pronunciation, or was it to potentially differentiate between a topic or category?
No, they just wanted me to have, they just wanted to be able to kind of brand me from the start without having to think about what I had done before with a different publisher. They kind of, I think, wanted to own a brand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Got you. With creating a piece of work and then putting it out, as we see across today's society, the opportunity to self-publish, put things out on your own is a lot easier than probably back when you first started.
Yeah.
With that in mind, thinking about going and getting uh, your work accepted by a publisher or a publishing house or an agent, even, um, what was the first step that you figured out you needed to do to move that process forward?
Yeah. So, like you said, back when I started, self-publishing was almost a dirty word. It
Yeah.
wasn't something you did, right? Unless you wanted to be like blacklisted. It was so bizarre. Like I had a friend who, or have a friend who started writing around the same time I did, and she self-published from the jump, and she was treated pretty poorly for a bunch of years. And now she's laughing at everyone because she's making a lot more money than the rest of us. So, there's that. But
Yeah.
I just was very, I just wanted to go the traditional route. Um I didn't think there was another option at the time, I mean that seemed like the option that would be the most, maybe it was just the most validating, right?
Yeah.
And so I just felt like that was what I had to do. And so yeah, that was part of the reason why I started going to conferences and learning how to pitch myself and meet people and just getting to be in the same room with agents and editors and hearing from them what they were looking for and getting to go sit in a bar and have an actual conversation with them to know that they weren't, these really scary people. That was
Right.
part of it too. And yeah, just making those contacts that if you pitch them, or even if you just said, hey, I'm working on this, and they're like, oh, here's my card, send it to me when you're done. Like that's invaluable because then you always have that ability to write to them and say, hey, I met you at XYZ. You asked for this, even if it's a year later, and it's
Right.
all good. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Another interesting scenario from my perspective is that little shy girl
Mm.
who would rather just be in the book is now having to pitch about the book.
Yeah.
How did you get past the nerves of having to do that?
Pitching sucks. Okay. And
Yeah,
20 books in, I will continue to say pitching sucks. So
for
I
sure.
never wanted to do it. I always was like, hyperventilating on the spot. I have a really hard time selling myself. And so just figuring out how to even consolidate my idea into something that's not babbling, right? It was
Yeah,
hard for me. But no, I just was very like I had blinders on. I'm like, I need to do this. Like this is what I've always wanted to do, and I need to figure out how to get it done. And if I have to stand here in this line and get screamed at for my 3-minute pitch, then I guess that's what I'm doing today, you know? Yeah. And I also I didn't love the pitching, but I loved the environment of the crime conferences, and the mystery writing community is just the best community as far as I'm concerned of writers out there. And it always felt like home to me. So being there was the reward for maybe having to do the 5-minute nerve-wracking pitch.
yeah, for sure. Yes, pitching sucks all the way around in every creative environment possible. Even in regular business, pitching sucks
Yeah.
because there's always that opportunity of you have no idea how the person is going to be responding, if they're just going to say no, if they're going to get your idea, if they're going to see any potential in it. Um, Having to put yourself out there like that is always a stressful thing for creatives.
Yeah.
I imagine even more so for writers, um, because a lot of times you spend an extensive amount of a year working on a piece
Mm.
and then having to step into that of all right, now I've got to get this out there. Got to go pitch it. Um, would you say that having an agent as a separate entity from the publishing company is something that is valuable, or is it just as easy to have one that's attached to the publishing company?
I don't think I don't think that there's agents that are that's kind of a conflict of interest, right? Because ultimately the agent is working for you, the author.
Yeah,
So to have one that's working actually for the publishing company, that I don't think that would happen unless it's a publishing company that's not set up very well. And so maybe people want to steer clear of that.
got you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Great
Yeah.
information.
Yeah. So agents are, there's a lot of there's a lot of conversation these days about as self-publishing gets more popular and people have made a lot of money self-publishing and
Yeah,
traditional publishing, unless you're a really really big name, you're probably not making a ton of money, right? So there's a lot of conversation about all of those things. There's hybrid publishing now. There's a rise in self-publishing. There's so many different ways to do it nowadays. I've been really fortunate. So I'm on my second agent. So the agent I got back when I got my first series, I ultimately switched to a new one just a couple of years ago. She's wonderful. Um, and I feel like it's important to have somebody who's kind of looking out for you, right? As
yeah,
Because publishers are out there for themselves ultimately too, and you have to, as an author, and this took me a long time to learn, you have to understand that this is a business. It's great that they want to publish your book, and for those first few years I was like, oh my god, thank you, you want to publish me, do whatever you want, right? And that's not the way you go about it.
right.
You have to look at it as a business deal because it is.
Yeah, for sure. Was there any instances early on where something may have taken place that you realized afterwards that, oh man, I need to pay way more attention to what I'm agreeing to in this contract?
Yeah, I mean, nothing like major, but I did I did really start to realize that you got to pay attention to your royalty statements and you got to learn how to read them, which I've still not mastered. Um, because there were some things that with my first publishing house that I just didn't understand how they did something versus how another house did something. They're not
Right,
always the same, so you can't like translate from one to another. And there was a point where I had to ask a lot of questions about a certain rights that had been sold and that I hadn't seen any payment for, and just understanding how it was done. And it was frustrating at the time, but it was my own fault because I hadn't paid attention the whole time. I
right,
just took it for granted that these people know what they're doing, and then my agent knows what they're doing as they're looking at these statements and managing all the payments. So
right,
definitely need to be cognizant of what's happening and not leave it to other people.
right. Absolutely. And the reason I'm asking these questions is because I understand copyright issues with anything that I've ever created. Um, Looking at different scenarios where I've worked in the music industry with different artists and stuff like that, and how the music industry treats individuals in terms of ownership components of things.
Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to just bring that up and to see if there was uh, anything that could be relatable from that perspective across the board, and which I think it is, yeah, honestly. Um, Also, too, we're going to have all of your information in the description in terms of ways to contact you. And, if somebody's interested in working with you as a coach for writing and all that kind of stuff, is that something that you bring up within your coaching sessions and stuff that you do? Is how to look at those contracts and pay attention to certain things?
I mean, I don't go through contract like us. It's really not my forte. But what I do talk about, if people want to talk about publishing and that part of it, a lot of people I work with are newer writers who are trying to get their first book started or written or finished and that kind of thing. But people who are at the stage of publishing, we certainly talk about that as well, and how to go about it, because it's kind of complicated, right? How do you
very
find the
much.
agent? How do you query the agent? How do you, all the things, right?
Yeah,
But I think one of the things that is a hill I will die on now is that you have to look at these people like business partners. You can't look at them like, oh, thank you so much for liking my stuff. You know what I mean? You can be grateful,
yeah,
but you can't let the gratitude color your vision and give these people more power than they should have over you and your work.
right. Yeah, and that is hugely uh, something that needs to be considered, especially if you're going into the areas of something where there's a possibility of creating merchandise
Mhm.
around it. If it's a series of novels or writings or um, different things in terms of like J.K. Rowling's series, um, all of those situations, even with Disney production and stuff like that, there's always those external outer layers that come into play
Yeah.
where ownership can be taken over completely by the publisher, and you end up not seeing any of these additional products and revenue come from those additional products.
Yeah.
So that always needs to be considered. And that's one of the things that I try to do with my clients is I always make sure that they're understanding, hey, as you're coming up with this concept and about to put this out, there's these other scenarios where you can look at as well to help monetize what you're doing with that main thing, whether it's a book, whether it's a product, whether it's a garment or anything like that. Just looking at residual outshoots of ways to make extra money to be able to support that initial piece.
Yeah.
One of the things that I found interesting from the intro that I did for you, with the title of your first novel being Needing to Die, and needing was spelled completely different from the way it may sound. What was the concept behind that in creating that title?
It was kind of a play on words. So it meant a couple things. So it was cat's need.
Yeah,
And the series was about a woman who kind of left her corporate life and became a gourmet pet food chef, and she made pet treats. So it was also a play on the cooking thing.
yeah,
Yeah, so that's where that came from.
okay. And what was the further um, end point of making that transition within that story for the character?
What do you mean from the corporate life to the
Right.
Yeah, so the way I set it up was this person had been very, rooted in her corporate life, and she had a certain ego about it, and she felt good about herself, and then she got fired and she didn't feel so good about herself. And so she started to kind of question everything in her life, including her family and her boyfriend and where she lived. And she found this cute little house in this tiny little town and decided that she was gonna start over and do something different. She wasn't quite sure what at that point, but she had enough money to go and, buy the house and think about it. And she had a cat who had some gastro issues that she cooked his food for. And so word got out in the animal community that, there were good treats at this house. So stray animals started coming to visit her, and, the neighbors brought their animals over for treats. And, eventually she ended up doing her own pet food and pet treat business.
Right. Okay. And for the full moon mysteries, not delving in a little bit more of magic and mystery intertwined, what was the thought process of coming up with that concept and that idea?
Yeah, my editor at the time, we were brainstorming a new series for me after the Positively Organic one ended, and he was like, and I said I would love to do something paranormal, and he said, "How about a modern day Bewitched?" And I was like, "Oh, that's perfect," because I love doing like mother-daughter, exploring mother-daughter relationships too, and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, that was a fun. I loved that series, and I really wish it had gone beyond 3 books. And I'm thinking about what to do with that, potentially on my own going forward, because I don't feel like the story's complete. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, that was a fun series to write.
And was the initial agreement just for 3 books? Is that how it's kind of got to a stalled point?
Yeah, so typically these types of books you get them in either 2 or 3 book contracts. So this was just bad timing. The first book came out in May of 2020
Ah,
when no one was doing anything
yes,
and nobody was promoting anything. And yeah, yeah. So I think it just didn't, the timing was bad and it kind of stalled the sales. And yeah.
gotcha. With stepping into that series as well, um, one of the things that we brought up earlier was the fact that you had this spiritual uh, interest and connection early on
Mhm.
versus the religious environment. Um, were you able to step into some of that with that series,
Oh, yeah.
looking at that and researching and figuring things out?
Yeah, for sure. Like I love crystals. And so I made my main character the owner of a crystal shop. And so, I mean, I was already like obsessed with crystals, but this just allowed me to go and buy more of them and, write them off on my taxes, which was awesome. So, but yeah, and like the whole witch world, that was something that I love. I've always been fascinated by witches. I went to school, like I said, at Salem State, so I was around witches all the time, and yeah, just kind of creating a version of that that resonated with me. And I wanted to do something that had a little bit of political bent. So the world I created in the witch world was all around a family that was evil and a patriarchal family that was trying to
Okay.
take over and
Yeah.
remove all the matriarch witches from power. And so
Yeah.
at the time it was, it felt like it was reflecting a little bit of what was going on. I didn't know how bad it was going to get, but um, yeah, it was really fun to write.
And how does that, as you describe it, woo woo touch play into your coaching for others as well?
Yeah, I love doing tarot and oracle. Like so in my membership especially, that's where we play a lot with the woo-woo stuff. So I have a bunch of co-writing sessions that I do in my membership for writers. And they always start with oracle or tarot card readings. And then once a month we call it the writer's seance, and we do it around a certain astrological event. That's so like we're doing one, I think it's next week with the other eclipse, the second eclipse of eclipse season. And so we'll spend some extra time doing some tarot and doing some cards and doing some prompts about whatever's going on astrologically.
Right.
And then we'll get into our own writing. But I just find it helps people kind of get into that creative mode, right? If we do a little journal prompt that gets the juices flowing, then they can either continue with that or they can go work on their project.
Right. Right. Do you feel that stepping into and understanding those elements in terms of being able to look at things from a non structured religious format has allowed you to grow as an individual and help understand yourself better?
Absolutely. Because there's so much possibility. I love just thinking about different ways of looking at the world and looking at, how we talked about past lives a little bit,
Yeah.
looking at how maybe that's a thing and just trying to tie all the pieces together. Because I've always been curious about life and, myself and why I am the way I am in certain ways. And I've always been on this quest to understand myself a little better. And I think those things are so much more, they, they allow you to do that so much better than following some dogma that just says, okay, well, you're here, you have to be miserable, then you die, and you're going to be happy forever in some heaven that we don't even know exists, right? Like it just doesn't have the same impact.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. And I get it from the simple fact that I had an experience in 2012 where a friend of mine who was a psychic um, did a reading for me. And my grandfather actually came through with a message. And the irony of him coming through was the fact that he was a Southern Baptist minister in East Tennessee. And so you can imagine how much contradiction is
Right.
potentially there, right? So I'm getting this message, and it's so clear and descriptive of an experience that him and I had. It was like, there's absolutely no way possible. Number one, my friend would know this. I've never shared this story with anybody. It was just our thing, right? That we experienced. That's kind of why I asked that question about grandparents early
Yeah.
on. But it was so detailed, it blew my mind. It was like, oh, wait a second. All of those things that I was thinking I'm not getting the full information on as I'm growing up and going to these schools and different things like that, I just got confirmation that some of that was true.
Mhm.
And then I don't know if you've ever heard of this person or not, but Dr. Brian Weiss,
Hmm.
he has those books about past life
Yeah.
regression, different things like that. And I was led to those. And once I read the first one, which I believe was at that time, Many Lives, Many Masters, once I got through that one, I was like, all right, that's just one book. Let me read some more. Because if it
Mm.
comes out in more than one, then it can make more sense and I can believe it. I can
Yeah.
buy into it. I read every single one of his books
Yeah.
and was like, oh, now I get it.
Yeah. That's
So
cool.
much of my life that didn't make any sense to me is now starting to make absolute sense.
Mm.
Then, within that same year, I was introduced to an astrologer who is a third generation astrologer who just this week had her 96th birthday.
Oh, wow.
And she does everything by hand. Like, she doesn't use a computer. Even if you go for a session with her, getting an update on your chart, she records on a cassette tape.
Wow.
And you walk out the door with a cassette tape, which is, for some people, it's a little bit difficult now to
Yeah.
be able to listen to that back.
Yeah.
But that's how old school she is in terms of the way she gives you the information. But again, it just expanded more information for me.
Yeah.
It made even more sense. And I think a lot of times in society where we say, no, that's wrong, we don't want to listen to that, that's not valid information, we miss out on the opportunity to actually understand better.
Yeah.
And that's where I find it very fascinating when I come across somebody like yourself who's using that terminology woo woo, because that's kind of how people have started to brand, spiritual conversation at this
Yeah.
point in time, so that it's palatable
Yeah.
for other people to get. Um, it, it makes for more enjoyable conversation for me because I understand and can talk about different things that you may experience as well that make
Yeah.
even more sense to the conversation based on that. So it's very fascinating for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Very cool.
with closing, as the storyteller that you are, and thinking about the possibilities of what you're going to do moving forward, are you focusing more on the coaching and helping others within a community, or are you also thinking, yeah, I've got a few more books in me?
Oh, I've got a lot more books than me.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm just getting started. Yeah, no, I have a lot of ideas going for books. I've got a couple more books in my series that I just contracted for, but I'm, also looking to write some books in a different, still mystery and crime, but a different genre than what I'm currently doing. And then yeah, just keep building up my business that I started just a couple of years ago, really, and have really only just recently started to be able to put a lot of time into it. So
got you. And was that business as a result of the pandemic?
No, I mean, I had started thinking about it before the pandemic. Like probably right before the pandemic. I had worked in corporate for a long time. I was over it. I really was over it, but I
Yeah.
didn't know how to exit it. And I still haven't completely exited it. I'm still doing consulting, but I'm not, actually an employee at this moment, which is lovely and gives me more time to work on other things. But no, I really started it because I felt like newer writers especially needed to have a community and somewhere where they could go to kind of translate the messages they were hearing, because I go to a lot of these conferences. I hear the conversations that are happening. I see when well-meaning agents and publishers talk to people about, oh, that'll never work or that won't sell, and I can just see how defeated that makes people. And I remember being that person, the eager-eyed person at the conference, like soaking up everything and believing everything everybody said because they had to know better. And I just wanted to have a space for people who, could um could really believe in themselves and still keep working on their stuff, no matter what is somebody who may or may not know the next thing that's going to hit, right?
Yeah.
is, uh,
Yeah, exactly.
is able to kind of take that away from them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Fantastic. I think that's a perfect place for us to be able to close out today, around that thought. One of the things that I always like to do at the end of each one of these conversations is always remind the audience to listen to your heart, but also in the process, be kind to your mind.
Mm, I love that.